And salutations everyone! With the closing chapter of the Rise of Azshara, and the upcoming end of Battle for Azeroth, we are still filled with more questions than answers in regards to Sylvanas Windrunner and her grand scheme. Well, today we're going to try and fit the pieces together on what the Banshee Queen's endgame might be, and what the finale to Battle for Azeroth might be. To start things off, let's start off the very beginning of Battle for Azeroth. And don't worry, we're not going to cover the whole and entire story of Battle for Azeroth here. Anyways, the Legion is defeated, the world is recovering from a stabbing from Sargeras himself, and the planet is slowly dying. Both the Horde and the Alliance had endured heavy losses, and are still recovering. Rather than letting the factions lick their wounds, Sylvanas deems it more significant to war with the Alliance than ever, after the lifeblood of Azeroth was brought to her attention. The Azerite gifted more than visions and ideas to Sylvanas, also gifting her with the perfect reason for war, as the Alliance could also weaponize this blood against the bulk of the Horde. Something she thought that they would be perfectly willing to do because old hatreds were never truly gone. It is my belief that Sylvanas would have warred regardless if the Azerite existed or not, as the opportunity to end the Alliance was still very much possible after the loss of Varian Wrynn and the majority of their fleet. As stated in the book Before the Storm, Sylvanas and Nathanos' greatest desire was to see Stormwind fall, and that was before Azerite was even brought up by Gallywix. Now, why even start a war with the Alliance if there isn't a world to conquer if it dies? Personally, I believe that Sylvanas views the World Soul as more trouble than it's worth, and if Argus or even Outlands was any indication, a planet can survive a crumbling or two. Now, Azeroth is a Titan and Outlands wasn't, but I don't think that would really make a major difference within Sylvanas' eyes. That, or she plans to go off-world, much like how Ner'zhul planned when Outlands was too destroyed to live on and Azeroth was too difficult to secure. But personally, I don't think she's going to leave Azeroth, as the main issue with Outlands was that there wasn't enough food, water, and natural resources to sustain a race. However, the undead do not require these things, which would allow them to live on a quote-unquote dead planet. It is, of course, also possible that Sylvanas doesn't think it'll get that bad for Azeroth, and that a little war never hurt the planet before. Of course, previously, we never had a Titan-sized sword sticking right into the very planet's heart. Magni warned Sylvanas to get Gallywix's goblins out of the wound, but she had little desire to do so, as she needed Azerite to help win the war against the Alliance. She used Bane and Hamul, who would have challenged her ideas regarding the use of Azerite and the war on Teldrassil, to distract themselves with healing the wound. One of the more interesting things that we'll get to later on within the video is that when the Heart of Azeroth is brought to Thanos' attention, he proclaimed that the Heart of Azeroth may prove useful. Which could mean lots of things, but like I said, we'll get to that with time. Shortly afterward, we are sent off on our mission to save Talanji and the Prophet Zul from the Stockades, which will become something of a reoccurring theme. Battle for Azeroth has a lot of jailbreaks, and I mean a lot. During this mission, we stumble across Varrock Saurfang's cell, who at this time has committed, or at least enabled, actions which go against his orcish honor, and which he regrets deeply. I believe that not only was Varrock being tested in what Sylvanas tasked him to do, but also Bane, the other leaders of the Horde, and of course, we the champions. An ongoing theme is player choice, honor, and loyalty, things that Varrock praised that we never have to choose between. Of course, we end up having to anyway. For Varrock, he had to choose between ending Malfurion's life and forsaking his honor, or sparing Malfurion's life and disobeying his war chief's order. He of course disobeyed, which resulted in the burning of Teldrassil, but Malfurion at least living another day. That was Sylvanas' test to Saurfang, and he failed it. Not only that, but he was against Sylvanas' plans to flood the Undercity with the Plague, the very plague that took the lives at the Wrathgate where his son had fell. This was why Saurfang just wanted to die at the Alliance's hands, rather than dirty himself further with Sylvanas' cursed horde. We leave Saurfang to his fate as he asked of us, which later on allows him to be freed by Anduin. Later on, we are even tasked by Sylvanas to hunt him down when he is freed with her most elite Dark Ranger, which we are prompted with the choice to help Zakan fight this Dark Ranger and her force, or report Zakan and his traitorisms to Sylvanas. But we do as we were asked. We gain the Zandalari's trust, we gain their fleet, we gain them as our allies, but things go awry as the bulk of the Alliance takes out the Zandalari fleet and King Rastakhan. This devastates not only the Horde, but the Zandalari as a whole. Luckily, this doesn't discourage Sylvanas from keeping them as allies, and she has other plans in store just for the occasion. This is where our role in the war campaign becomes important, as in the first part of the war campaign we discovered the eldest son of Daelin Proudmoore, Derek Proudmoore, who Sylvanas would choose to raise as a sleeper agent to kill the Proudmoores in their sleep. Now once more, I feel like this was a test, though this wasn't as flexible as with Saurfang, as Teldrassil's loss was still a major one, but with Derek, he was an opportunity to remove the Koltirians' leadership and the powerhouse that is Jaina, as Jaina Proudmoore has been one of the largest walls that Sylvanas has had to deal with in the Blood War. If not for her, the Alliance would have never gotten through the fog of Blight released on the fields of battle, and most of the leaders of the Alliance, Anduin, Genn, and Illyria, would have been taken out by the Blight Trap in Lordaeron's throne room. Jaina really is the MVP of the Alliance within Battle for Azeroth. Victory! Now previously the tests were on either us or Saurfang. This time it was on Bane, who became the second person to question Sylvanas' schemes after Saurfang was removed. Bane was not really subtle in his anger over Derek being raised, which even prompted him to investigate why Sylvanas was even chosen as war chief by Vol'jin in the first place. This led to a choice to either help Bane rescue Derek, or inform Sylvanas on Bane's rescue with Zelling. Regardless, the outcome is the same, and is in fact encouraged to the Sylvanas loyalist to play along with Bane and his heroics in saving Derek. Regardless of what you choose, Sylvanas caught wind of the deed and has Zelling executed in front of the leaders of the Horde, and Bane is arrested to serve as an example. Once again, the choice is heavily pushed here, and you are allowed to commune with the leaders on what just happened, learning that many of them aren't so happy with what their war chief just did. At this point, you're either a Sylvanas loyalist or you're against her, but regardless of who you are, you still aren't in on her grand scheme and what it is. That show of force was simply to get an idea or a reaction out of those who have the stomach to work for Sylvanas. While the choice in the game isn't very important at the current moment, it is important in the grand scheme that is Sylvanas' endgame, of deciding who is fit for her faction and weeding out those who might resist her. Moving on to the next chapter, we have the introduction, or for some, the reintroduction of Xal'atath, the Blade of the Black Empire, who paves the way into Nazjatar by going into the hands of Sylvanas and Nathanos. Xal'atath, who is an old god placed into a cursed blade, is freed thanks to us and is then taken by N'Zoth, who then gives us his blessing, which by your own choice can be kept or removed. The blade is then returned to Sylvanas, which is something we don't get a choice in. An important factor about the blade at this point is that it is asked to be used for N'Zoth's will and no longer harbors Xal'atath herself. Something I don't believe we warned Sylvanas about, but an old god weapon is an old god weapon to her, I suppose. So, it's N'Zoth who guides her, or rather Nathanos, to the precise location where Nazjatar is to be opened by the Tidestone of Gol'Kanath, by Queen Azshara. This results in the remaining ships of the Horde and the Alliance being lost, which puts them on a more even playing field on the seas. Now, this text was only in the Datamine broadcast text and never shown in game to my knowledge, but it does match up rather well with Sylvanas' thought process. Going by what Sylvanas says in this, she and Nathanos were aware that Nazjatar would swallow up both the Alliance and the Horde's fleet, and those that were sent on this mission were to be those who showed disloyalty to Sylvanas and would be removed via the sinking. That would include Balrisra and Orthamar and several other members of the Horde. Afterwards, Nathanos would disappear along with the empty blade of Xal'atath, supposedly to the Rendezvous, with whom or what, really hard to say, but I have my suspicions of it being the following. Halia, who is confirmed to be still active and is associated with the sea and death, plus Sylvanas and her still have an unresolved deal that's yet to have been revealed quite yet. Remember that the Kavaldir and the Naga had warred over the sea for years now, and it's possible that Halia could be an ally against Azshara. Azshara, who dominates the realm of Nazjatar, and originally her Naga had attempted to use the blade and other artifacts to conjure a powerful storm across Azeroth. It's always possible that through Ashbane, who Sylvanas freed in the first place, bridged an alliance between Sylvanas and Azshara, and Xal'atath was the key to all of their goals, as the next time we see Ashbane, after she rode on Sylvanas' boat, she is seen commanding and helping the Naga. How do you suppose she ended up there? Through Sylvanas. But it's important to remember that the dagger was possessed by N'Zoth, and could have led Nathanos to something else altogether, as that was the initial goal, to find something and let Xal'atath lead you to it. Maybe it was N'Zoth, maybe it was the fallen characters above. Again, really hard to say exactly right now, but I do think it'll come up, and it was something N'Zoth wanted them to find. With Nathanos MIA and the faction stuck in Nazjatar against Azshara's forces, Bane's execution comes up, and this is where things get even more interesting. A vision is seen of Bane's death by Sylvanas' word. Lorthamar, or Anduin, depending on your faction, asks of you to save him. If you're Horde, you can tell Nathanos, who's lurking within Nazjatar, of Lorthamar's betrayal, and once more you are asked to play along with it, and this time a trap is set up. Almost like Sylvanas wants Bane to be rescued rather than executed. During the rescue, Jaina, Shah, Thrall, and Saurfang meet up and decide to work together, as Varrock Saurfang had successfully fetched Thrall from Outlands to aid in putting a stop to Sylvanas. We have a little scuffle with the Sunreavers, who are still ticked off at Jaina for what she did in Mists of Pandaria, which was regarded as the Purge of Dalaran. Fields with Thrall and Jaina are had, and Bane is saved and brought to his home in Thunderbluff, which in their eyes will share the same fate as Teldrassil, burned by Sylvanas. Lorthamar agrees with Dalrisla after reflecting on the past in the Isle of Thunder that working with the Alliance is their best course of action against Azshara. Definitely my favorite part of 8.2, but it doesn't stop there. Again, if you chose to follow Sylvanas, you're told by Nathanos the following.
Saurfang, Thrall, and the Alliance. It is vexing to allow our quarry to believe they escaped us, but we must trust in the Warchief's plan. Soon, your loyalty will face an even greater test. I do hope you prove worthy of the Dark Lady's favor. I've been recalled to Orgrimmar. Remain in Nazjatar. Keep playing along with these traitorous vipers until you are summoned.
It's clear that this confirms that they wanted Bane to be rescued. What is surprising to him, at least from what I can tell, is that the Horde and the Alliance worked together to achieve this. This was probably to help root out the rats. It's important to not forget that it was the Deathstalkers trying to assassinate Thrall, and potentially his family, that drove him into joining Saurfang's quest to restore the Horde's honor. And I do think it's very possible Sylvanas intentionally rooted Thrall out right now by doing this. So we can also assume Nathanos achieved what he needed to in Nazjatar, and as far as I've seen, he is no longer with Xal'atath in hand as well. He could still have it, and it's just not shown on him, or he made a trade-off with someone or something, or it is simply back with Sylvanas in Orgrimmar. Later on in the raid, with the Alliance and Horde banded together against Azshara, N'Zoth is freed and Azshara has been swept away to a place unknown. Both Lorthamar and Jaina agree the war must end in order for them to survive the coming of a free old god, which means Sylvanas needs to go. But before we can continue, there's an important thing to be brought up here. Exactly how did N'Zoth get freed? Oh, by the Heart of Azeroth, of course. And who said the Heart of Azeroth would prove useful? That's right, Nathanos. Coincidence? I think not. Okay, maybe there's a smidgen of coincidence there, but still, that's suspicious, and you can't tell me it's not. Finally, we are caught up to speed, and I can conclude everything I just said altogether. What is Sylvanas' endgame? I've stated it before, but my belief is that the endgame is making Azeroth a world of undeath. A world free from the path of emotion, loss, and living. What had once been a curse to her is now, in her eyes, a blessing from life. I do not believe that Sylvanas is working with N'Zoth, but I do think she fully intends to use him for her own purposes somehow, and has been helping him just to do so. Much like how Garrosh had used the Heart of Y'Shaarj to fulfill his purpose. In this case, though, I think Sylvanas is getting more than she bargained for with a freed and fully living old god. Even if he is the weakest, we've never dealt with an old god fully freed before. Do I think Sylvanas can outplay an old god in her 3D chess? As much as clever as she is, I have the feeling she's underestimating N'Zoth, a being who has been playing everyone for a very long time now. And Xal'atath is the key to all of this. But we'll talk about all possibilities here. One of my theories was that Sylvanas was going to use Xal'atath to imprison N'Zoth within the dagger, and have that power all to herself to use on her enemies. However, I'm not so sure how she can do that when the dagger is serving under N'Zoth's will, and it was the other old gods who band together to seal Xal'atath and the dagger in the first place. I'd be far more concerned with the idea that N'Zoth might just shove Azshara or Sylvanas into that dagger instead. This is all assuming Sylvanas plans on taking N'Zoth in the first place. Perhaps we are overestimating who she plans to take out first, or at all. She could very well take us out and raise us to fight against N'Zoth, making us immune to his whispers. A concept that the Lich King himself fostered to unite all of Azeroth in undeath against the many threats out there. What I do think might be Sylvanas' plan is to gather the Alliance and Horde that are opposing her all in one place, either Thunderbluff or Stormwind, and get rid of them all right then and there. A very similar tactic used by Varimathras and Putris when faced with the Lich King, where they used the Blight on the Alliance, Horde, and the Scourge, which were all enemies of the Legion. This is what I think is Sylvanas' endgame, to unite all of Azeroth in undeath, and therefore ensuring the planet is not defined by faction or race. It's been proven time and time again, when the factions team up, that they can take on anything, and it's not something that I think has escaped Sylvanas. However, this dream of hers is of course a nightmare for so many others. She's not been subtle in this approach to most Eastern Kingdoms, Darkshore, and for what she plans to do when Anduin and Stormwind have fallen. All the while, some of the Horde might think they're safe, but time and time again the Horde's other races have proven disloyal and shown their true nature to Sylvanas. The choices the racial leaders have made, us, and other characters have made, reflect on how Sylvanas views the Horde, and what would have been spared or not been spared from undeath. Which again, in her eyes, is saving you from hell and the pain that life gives. But I think Sylvanas will be proven wrong, or at the very least fail to achieve this goal. I think that at the end of the raid of Battle for Azeroth, it won't end with Sylvanas' death, but rather simply her removal as War Chief. She will try to end those who oppose her in Mulgore or Stormwind, but fail, and ultimately the Horde will regain what made it strong, and they will be united without undeath, like Sylvanas wants. What I think we'll get is a reverse raid, with starting out with dealing with Sylvanas and her twisted form of the Horde, and her escaping when she realizes she can't achieve it this way, leading to whatever is the next expansion. Maybe this could humble her and open the doors to redemption. I know, bad joke. Resulting in us dealing with N'Zoth at the end of the raid, possibly, or dealing with Azshara once again. Maybe Azshara possessed by N'Zoth, or maybe something else. Maybe an awakened Azeroth, who knows. or maybe they'll be saving us off for the next expansion. Anyways, guys, that's what I think Sylvanas' endgame is going to be. Maybe it's too predictable, and maybe it's not going to happen. Leave your thoughts down below. Do you think Sylvanas' endgame lines up with mine, or do you think it's something else? I'd really love to hear your thoughts on this. Go ahead and give this a like, give it a share, and, well, if you didn't like it, then I suppose give it a dislike. Oh, and ring that blasted bell if you want to get notified about this channel. Come and join us on Discord, we'd love to have you for our discussions. Maybe follow me on Twitter to hear me more often. Join me on Twitch to see me play the video games, though I am on break for now. Or maybe support me on Patreon. A little help goes a long way, and I would greatly appreciate it. All of those in the description down below, as well as some other things. But until next time, my friends, see ya!